Hello underwater friends, and welcome to my new classroom. Today I'm going to show you how I color correct images with Lightroom Classic.
Okay, here we are in Lightroom. So the most important when you correct your underwater pictures is first to look at the image, but also to look at the histogram. It will give you a good representation on how your picture is and the problem. So here on the histogram, we see that it's quite even. It goes from black on the left to white on the right, and everything is pretty uniform. But when we look at the picture, we can see, especially on the face, that the face is a little bit gray and white, and it shouldn't be that way. So first we're going to do white balance, then we're going to work on exposure, and then we'll see some of the tools depending on the images we correct. So this one, biggest problem is white balance. So white balance, you can start by taking the picker here and then pick a point that is gray normally, and then you have the representation on the left side right here. So when you go through the image, it will tell you how it's going to affect it. So try to get something that is nice. Okay, for example here. And we can see that now the face is much nicer, but the problem is the background became a little bit green. So when you do white balance and actually any correction, it's very good to press on the Y button. Like this you can see your image. So we can see here we're better on the face, even the black is more black and everything, but the background became a little bit gray and green. Maybe we want to go on the blue a little bit to lower it a little bit. The face is still nice, but the blue is nicer, and like this we have a good correction. You can always do it with temperature and tint only, but many times it's good to start with the picker or even with automatic right here. Let's do automatic to see how it goes. Well, it's not really nice. Command Z to go back. So now I have my image like this, so I think it's okay for the face, but like we said, the background is not perfect, so we can probably add a little bit more blue. It's a bit less warm, but it's okay. Then we want to see other problems. So here, for example, we have points, but that we could just correct it with this one. So we click here, and then we choose the size, and then we can take off some backscatter and problems. I'm not gonna spend forever on that, it's quite basic. Reframing the picture is also very important. Actually, I didn't do it on the first one because I put it on the original format right away. But it's one of the things you want to do from the beginning. For example here, let's say we make our image a little bit smaller from the top. And then we're gonna have less of the problem of the top that we had that is too bright. Okay? So we can go back on as shot, or we can go on original, and it gives us the basic that it was before. What other problem do we have? Here we have too much white on the top, so we can try to potentially lower the whites a little bit. Okay, maybe you want to do exposure. Like this, it's gonna lower the top. It depends. If you double click on the name, it's gonna go back to 0. On most pictures, you don't want to change the exposure, except if it's completely wrong. Why? Because you will have more flexibility doing highlight, shadow, white and black. For here, for example, we can see that the black is very black, even though there is backscatter. So maybe we don't want to change the whole brightness of the image. So in our case, we could do, for example, highlight and white down. Like this, it's affecting mainly the bright parts, but it's not affecting the rest. Or we can do also exposure, and it's gonna bring the whole picture down. The black is even blacker and the image is nicer. So we see a before and after. So you can see in a few clicks, we went from a color that was a little bit weird, the blue of the background was not nice, the face was not properly exposed and white balanced, but now it's much better.
I'm organizing a workshop, so don't hesitate. I put the link below. In October, if you want to come, 6 people maximum, and it's going to be lots of fun for 1 week in Ahmed, Bali.
Okay, this one is really nice. It's just a little bit dark. We can see here from the histogram, it's everything a little bit to the left. But it's not, actually I'm going to remove this point because it's hurting my eyes. Oh, here we go. But the thing is, the subject is still a little bit dark as well, but the blue of the background is quite interesting and the contrast would be nice. So let's do a white balance first. Once again, the subject is a little bit green. So we try like this with the picker and we see like this. Okay, way too much. Okay, before and after with Y, we can see that it went to the magenta and the yellow. So when we have this, what we can do is we can either reset it or we can say, oh, I'm getting closer, even though the water background is horrible, but maybe by making less yellow and less magenta, I can find an in-between that will get our subject nicer. You can see the forehead, the face and everything is much nicer. And actually the blue of the background is still quite okay. Now what we can do, we can brighten mainly this area. So how are we going to do it? The back is dark, so black and shadow mainly, and the subject is mainly highlights. So we can bring up the highlights, not too much, and bring up the white a little bit, and maybe try with the shadow to see what it's affecting. Okay, so once again, before and after, so we can see we have a nicer exposed picture. Another thing that we can do is put a little vignette. It's gonna make it a little bit darker on the around. So we can lower like this. Not too much. If you see if you get to the left completely or the right completely, then it's not so good. But if you just correct it a little bit, you want to be subtle, and actually it's gonna bring your point of interest on the subject. One thing that I'm noticing is that now the hand and a couple of things are a little bit too bright, even though there is not much on the right side. But what I can do is I can lower the exposure a little bit. So now what happens is our subject became brighter, but we lowered everything. So what we did actually was to darken the background and still keep the subject lit properly, and actually with nicer colors. Next one. Okay, this one we have about the same problem. Our subject is very, very bright. So we're gonna see if we can do something. So let's start with white balance first. Okay, a little bit too magenta. And let's go on the blue. Let's see a Y to see before and after. Okay, well, not much change, but a little bit. And this time we can see that here on the face, it's very bright because the strobe was flashing here. So the exposure is kind of okay. There is many dark parts, but it's normal. It's the wetsuit and the dark of the background. But the subject is very bright. So what we can do, instead of changing the exposure, actually let's do with exposure to see how it goes. You see, we're getting somewhere, but before the subject is lit properly, everything is completely black. So we do Command Z to go back. And this time we're gonna try to change mainly the white to lower it and the highlights. And you see we can affect almost only the subject. With Y we can see before it was super bright, the teeth and everything, but we get back many informations. Unfortunately, this you can do it only with RAW. So you want to take your pictures RAW, and like this you have much more flexibility. Let's do a little bit less of the highlights, and actually I think it's getting somewhere. Okay, like this, probably. Okay, a little vignetting again. Here we go. And now the image is much better lit. It's a little bit too much on the black, and actually if you click here, you can see if some places were too black, and actually up, down to lose informations like this. So double click here, and then also on the white, we can see, for example, now we have minus 100, but if we go like this, we see all of the lost informations. Actually, when it's like this, you don't lose any informations, but it still looks too bright. So what we can do is go back down, actually maybe minus 37, and like this we have a well-exposed picture. Next one, a nudie branch, it's a Shaun the sheep. By the way, I'm in Amed, northeast of Bali, so if you want to come and take pictures of crazy animals with us, don't hesitate, we have many subjects. So here we can see, by picking this one, I decided to see all of the lost information. And actually for here, I think this subject is kind of okay, but it's a little bit too green. Here it would be very difficult to do a white balance using the picker, because as you can see, when we go on the black, it goes to very red. And if we pick on the green, it gets very blue. So nothing is really like in reality, even though this one is probably a little bit closer. So this one you have to adjust depending on what you think should be. So for me, I think it's a little bit more yellow and a little bit more magenta. Okay, probably like this. Now we can see that the background is completely black. It's normal, I use the snoot, and actually it's okay, but the problem is my subject is also a little bit too dark. So once again, we're gonna correct on highlight by bringing it up and even white a little bit, because we don't want to go on exposure and get the background completely horrible. So we're getting somewhere. Actually, let's crop a little because the subject is too small. Here we go. Now we have a better image with our subject that is taking more space. And we have a problem with this foreground that is too much. So we can try to see with vignetting first to darken a little bit the front, but it's not enough. So here in that case, what we can do is try to get this part darkened. Actually, everything that is not our subject around here. So here you can go on masking tool. And for example, I can do radial gradient and I pick what I want. Actually, the feather, I want it to be less. Here we go, not completely, of course. Pick my subject and then I'm gonna invert it. So it's gonna correct only, actually feather, a little bit less again. So feather, you can lower it a little. Here we go. So now we are mainly correcting the subject, and actually I can get it a little bit bigger. Here we go. And also on the side, because actually I don't want to affect this area. So now I'm gonna affect mainly the outside, so I can lower the exposure, and as you can see, it's touching only the outside of the image. So I went all the way down, so you can see the before and after. This one we can turn it a little bit, and actually we can just go a little bit closer at the bottom. Here we go. There is many options also on the mask, so we can choose, for example, to create new mask, and for example this one, go on brush, choose the size, choose the feather, and then maybe go like this to have. Okay, so now this time, as you understand, it's only gonna correct what's in the mask, and we can also lower the exposure. Here we go. So now we have an image that is nicer. Actually, I think the subject is too low. Here we go. I'm gonna do a video on composition, so if you're interested, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel. It's coming up. Okay, it feels still a little bit dark, so maybe I will try to bring up the shadows. Here we go. Okay. So now we have a nice contrast between the black and the foreground. I know it's cheating. Some people will say it's cheating. Of course it is, but my aim was to try to get the snoot on that part, and then it went a little bit too big. So I could keep this like it was before. It's not really an issue. I could just like trim it a little bit and change like this area and stuff like this, but I decided to take it off completely. Next one. Okay, this one is a frogfish. It's very bright, and we can see on the red points we even have some overexposed images where we lost information. So on this one, let's start with cropping. So I want the subject to be more like this. Actually, I can crop, here we go, a little bit that way. Okay, now let's start with a white balance. So white balance, we can find the picker and find the gray part. You see here it would become completely green. Here as well, when we take the white, it's a little bit warmer. And actually, I prefer it that way. Okay. So the white is whiter and the subject is still nicer. Okay, on this image, everything goes to the right. So actually the whole image is overexposed and there is nothing in the black. So what we can do for this one, we can start by changing the exposure. Here we go. So our subject is still well exposed and then the whites are still too much. We can lower the white and also the highlights. Why? From before and after, we can see that we have more contrast, but actually by lowering the blacks, we're gonna get much more contrast. Here we go. I think it's much more pleasing like this. Once again, we're gonna do on vignetting a little bit. Here we go. It's just, you see, this have to be subtle, but it's just bringing your attention to the subject. So you can see with and without the vignetting. So it's not very strong, you don't really see the difference, but actually it makes it much nicer. Next one. Okay, here we have a big white balance problem. Our subject is nice. Actually, we're losing some of the tail here, so maybe we want to go that way. Oops, problem, if we want to see the whole tail, then we're cutting the head. So we have here to change the format and we can put original. When we put original, for me it's 4/3. So I can either try to center it. Actually, I think, yeah, that's probably the best because it's the animal, the seahorse is really looking forward, so it would be nicer. Okay, now we can do a white balance. So let's try with a picker and we can see if we go on the red, it's like this. And if we go on the black, it's changing it, but actually I want this area to be more white. So on the left, we can see what happens. Like this, the white is a little bit whiter, but now it's too green, so we want to go back a little. Okay. This image is very moody. By pressing I can see I'm at f14. And it's a little bit too dark, okay? We can see only informations on the left side. So on this one, we can try to change exposure a little. Okay. Let's do a Y to see a before and after. Okay. The subject is popping up much more and it's more interesting. We can higher the highlights and even the white a little bit. Okay, I picked this part, so like I said before, if I was going too bright, I would see when it's, you see, when we lose information, that's when it gets red. Okay. Oh, here we see when we zoom on that we have too much white, so we're gonna remove a little bit. Here we go. This image for me is a little bit too moody, too contrasty, so we can lower a little bit the contrast. You see, it makes it a little bit more flat, a little bit less black. Cool. Okay, this image, problem with composition, the subject is too small, so let's make it a little bit bigger. Actually a lot bigger. And we can keep actually this one fish in the bottom. Yeah. So on this image, we can see that everything is dark, which is not really a problem, but our subject is also a little bit dark, and that is not what we want. So we could go up on exposure, but as you can see, it's all blended in, so it's not nice. So what we can do is bring up the highlights. That is going to bring up mainly the brightness from our subject, and you can see it pops much more. And even probably the white a little to the point of max. Okay. White balance I think is okay because the animal is meant to be blue and the white becomes really white, even though we can go maybe a little bit more yellow and magenta. Not much. Okay, now that we have this, actually that's probably the perfect timing to show how lens blur works. And when it works, apply. And this time it really figured the subject. Let's see. Visualize depth. Here we go. So our animal is yellow and the rest is background. So that's perfect. Before it was a little bit too sharp in the back and now it's getting much more blurry, which allows the animal to pop up more. To pop up, you have many options. One of them will be the color, in that case, the bright colors of the animal and the darker background. But also, sharpness will make your subject pop much better. Let's say we want to make more blur. Everything is super blurry in the background, maybe too much this time, but because our subject is very sharp, it allows us to see it even more. Okay, let's go a little bit less. Anyway, here we go. Okay, probably here. Yeah, I don't mind to have this blurry because it's not meant to be sharp. One little thing that I can do is this time I can try to see shadows and bring up the shadow a little bit. Here we go. So we have a before and after, and as we can see, the background is blurry, the subject is brighter, and the background is not. One of the things also that we could change is to try to change the color of the background. So for that, we can go here on color mixer and say, oh, but the blue, I want it more blue. You see, it's affecting all of the blue parts. And actually, I want it a little bit bluer. And this one, aqua. You see, it's changing mainly the background and actually making it more green on the left or less green on the right. Okay. Always Y to see before and after. Now I'm starting to feel that I have a problem with my fish here because it's taking my attention. So I can go here and then try to select it and see how it will remove it. Okay, and this dot as well, this thing, and that. Okay, yes, now the subject pops up more. Next one, okay, unfortunately we have a subject on the right side that is not very important, so this one we're gonna crop it like this, and actually a little bit more. Like I said before, I really like to have more space on the left side if the animal is looking left, and more space on the right if the animal is looking right. It's called breathing room. But actually, if I crop it like this, it's a little bit, but still a lot of space in the back, and we can see that it's very close to our subject. So this one, we're gonna go on 4:3. Sometimes you want to change the ratio that you meant to take your picture just in order to make it nicer. You can see here the animal pops up more. The background, there were many fish, silverfish that are shiny. As you can see, we have eggs in the cardinal fish. So there is many dots in the background. That's one of my biggest problem on this image. White balance I think is okay, and the foreground is too bright. So exposure seems to be okay. Maybe we can bring up the shadow a little. Yes, okay, but not much. Okay, let's not touch white balance and exposure. Texture is fine. But this time we're gonna try to apply this one and see if the backscatter in the background goes down. Yes, it does. So let's see what is affected, and it found our subject quite nicely, except this part. Okay. Okay. Let's see the before and after. Okay, actually this is blurry, but it was blurry before, so it's not a problem. So can make it a little bit more. Okay. Okay. Visualize depth. As you can see, this is not corrected because it's at the same level as this. So what we can do for this one, now that we have less problem of backscatter, we can still remove some dots like this, one at a time. Okay, but now we can select this area, so we have many options. Here, up, we can do linear gradient, pick from the side and then choose this area. And actually this one we're gonna do a little bit less exposure, less white, less highlights. And we can go also on texture, lower the texture to make it and lower clarity. Okay, let's see with and without the mask. So you can click here, without the mask and with. So you can see that what we did is darken this area a little bit and make it a little bit more blurry. Like this, the subject pops up more. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. Let's do a white for before and after. You can see the subject is almost the same, the background as well, but we have our eyes less attracted with the bottom and the subject is popping up better. Okay, what about a vignetting? Before and after. Okay, not too strong. But once again, it brings our attention to the subject. Yeah, much nicer in a couple of minutes. Okay, next one. A candy crab. So we can see here we have a few problems with the background. The image is a little bit too bright and the background is a little bit weird. And actually there is also a vignette, unwanted vignette. So let's crop it a little. Okay, this time I'm trying to get the eye near the rule of third line, but I think it will look better if we're on 4/3. Yeah, because you can see we have an empty space here, but it sits nicer on there. Here we go. We have a problem with a few dots. I don't know. I used the diopter on this image, so I guess there were like dots inside. Okay, easy to remove. Okay, there's not much contrast. Let's see with white balance first. Oh, you can see if we pick here that is kind of supposed to be white, it gets our background very different. Let's try here. And you can see now the subject is probably closer to the real colors, and with a Y you can really see that the background changed a lot. Okay, very big difference between those two images. We can see if we can lower the black to bring up a little bit contrast. On the right side we still have space, so maybe we can bring up the highlights a little. Here we go. And then maybe we can try to change the background color to make it a little bit bluer. Let's go on there, here, background. Yes, it picked up very nicely the background. So here we can go on bluer. Okay, we get it bluer, and now we want to find texture here. You see, it's especially here, it's removing some of the dots that were there and the fact that it's not very uniform. Okay, we still have a few dots that we could remove like this, but nothing bad. Okay, before and after. This one is very different after a few clicks. Next, same kind of problem. This little shrimp was in a sponge, and actually I'm cutting the arms here, so I'm gonna do original. Okay, and I'm gonna use the full picture because I didn't want to cut the legs. And this one I'm gonna do white balance with the picker and try to find, well, probably here. Okay, it's a little bit too much, of course, but I'm thinking that it's probably closer to what it was before. You can see the left side is completely red and orange and whatever, and now it's nicer. So maybe we want it to be a little bit warmer and still a little bit magenta, but it's still very different. But actually you can see with here the legs are much wider. Oh, I'm bothered with this dot here. Oh, actually those two as well. Okay, now we see that we have not much on the right side, but they should be white and the eyes should pop a little bit more. Now we don't want to change the whole exposure because it's probably lit correctly, but we want to bring up the whites and the highlights, and actually maybe even darken the black. So in a way we're doing more contrast, but actually we're mainly getting our subject to pop up more. Okay, let me show you one more thing. This time the eye is quite sharp, but if your eye was not super sharp, what you can do is take, for example, a brush, and you can brush into the eye. Here we go. Okay, I can go a little bit out, it's not a problem. And then one of the options is to go on preset, and then you go on iris enhancer. And then you can go before and after. And you can see the eye is much brighter and more defined. Actually, we have a problem, and we're gonna remove. So mask, subtract, brush, show overlay, and we're gonna remove some of the parts on the outside because it was affecting the outside too much. Okay. Okay, now we have selected pretty much only the eye. And now, so we're gonna mask again. We don't want to see the overlay. And then we can, for example, darken the black a little bit, bring up the highlights, and then we're gonna go on texture, bring it up, and maybe also sharpness. So let's see the before and after for the eye, you see, and actually with and without the correction. So before the correction and after, and you can see the eye pops much more. Okay, very nice. Wow. Okay, really cool. Next, okay, this one, it's a little emperor shrimp on a nudie branch. Let's try to do a reframing a little bit. So once again, we're gonna use 4/3 because it's not needed to be too long. And here, unfortunately, I'm removing some of the gills, so you see I have a problem in this image because I really have this one in the middle to get the gills, but that's not what I want because my subject is still the shrimp. So I guess having it that way feels better for me. I have a nice angle here, more space on the left. I even see the outside of the nudibranch. That is very nice. So it's nicer. Okay, let's remove a few dots before I get crazy. Oh, not much, but at least the big ones. Okay, oh, one more here. Okay, I will never stop, so let's stop. So now we see that the whole image is a little bit too bright, and actually the white is too white and everything. So for that case, we can go on exposure. Here we go. You see, we're evening the image, but still the white is too white, so we can lower the white a little and the highlights. Okay. So before and after, you see, much better. This was too bright, the white was almost burned, and now we get back some informations in it. Okay, maybe a little bit black. Okay, and maybe a little bit white again. Okay, I like it. Cool. By the way, it's a little bit late to say that, but make sure that your computer and mainly your monitor is well calibrated, because otherwise you're gonna make changes on images and it's not gonna be nice. This one, very blurry background. Let's reframe a little. Okay, here we go. Perfect. And we can see that we have a little bit too much white. Can lower the highlight as well. Okay. And maybe darken the black. Okay. The eye is sharp. You see, sometimes you don't want to overcorrect your images because that's what I wanted. And actually this one we can try to see. It's the first time I see this. I'm doing a vignette but plus. So actually it's just brightening a little bit the outside. Okay. Okay, final one. A nice manta. So as you can see, some of the white is too white. The white actually here is not white, it's green. So let's do a crop first. We can use this tool on this one because actually it's a very symmetric image, and if it was even more symmetric it would be cool. Okay, let's go on 4/3 as well. And now we can get the point of interest. Okay. Now it's very symmetric and I really like this because actually the two sides are exactly the same. Okay, so this one we can see that the balance is not good because this should be white. So we can just pick like a gray area. With white it would work as well. Okay, but maybe this time it's too much, actually, too much magenta, so we can go back down a little and not enough blue. Here we go. Okay, so the whole image is a little bit too bright. We can see everything is on the right, so we can lower a little bit the exposure. But mainly I'm gonna lower the blacks. Now we can see the grain and everything in the back, so we can try to see if we can get this one. The problem will probably be the tail. No, actually the tail is good. Let's bring it up a little bit. We're making the background a little bit more blurry. And it's quite cool. Okay, great. Next, what we can do is try to select the background, to separate the background. Tail, Yeah, this one is picking the tail, it's picking the sides, so it's not working. Okay, let's try to see if we can do it a different way. Okay, so we crop like this. So now we can go, actually, I want to lower the exposure a little bit more. Yeah, it's nicer. The background is nice. Oof, this one makes me crazy. Up. Okay, better. We can bring up the highlight a little. Quite a lot, actually. And even the white. Okay. And darken the black. No, the white's too much because now it's peaking. Okay, perfect. The exposure is much nicer. Now the only problem is the blue. The blue is okay, but I think it could be nicer. So let's try to see if we can correct that. Cool. Next one. Okay. So here's a before and after in like a couple of minutes. Quite nice.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Always makes me super happy. Don't hesitate to subscribe and hit the bell if you want to be notified for new videos. Bye bye, happy bubbles!